The last thing I wanted to add is that it's more of like a celebration moment from the last year. That when Spotify was doing their Spotify Wrapped at the end of last year for people, we had one person, we're not going to say who they are, send Marc a screenshot. One person in the Supra community send Marc a screenshot that Supra Insider, our podcast, was ranked higher on the list of podcasts for that person than Lenny's podcast. Like we were the number one podcast for that person. And that felt huge to me. I don't know. It's like one person, but still, like to know that we have this small subset of people that we are like a primary source of entertainment or education or whatever for them, it means a lot.
What's up, Ben?
Hello.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, man. Is this our first time chatting in the new year?
Yeah.
Wow. We're already 2 weeks in.
Wild.
I can't believe it. It's flying by. How are you still in? No, you're back in Miami.
I'm back in Miami. Got back from Spain. Yes, I was in Spain for almost a month, and I just got back this weekend. I mean, it is like ideal like schedule where I'm like, because of the jet lag, I'm going to bed like super early and I'm waking up really early. So I'm feeling pretty invincible right now.
What time did you wake up today?
Yeah, I think like 5.
Oh man, that's like
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock is where you're close enough to like other people waking up that you don't feel like a zombie or like an alien for being up too early, but you still get a solid like 2, maybe 3 hours before anyone expects you to even be available. Have you been making good use of that time?
Yeah. No, I've been like, okay, I want to keep my phone, Slack, email off, focus mode. And yeah, it's been super productive. And I think there's just something about like being 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and you're just feeling, okay, like if the day ended today, like I felt I had a productive day, that just kind of really sets the momentum for the rest of the day. So I don't know. I want to try to see if I can stick with it, but I know that in a week or two, I'm probably going to fall off the bandwagon. But what about you, man? How was your break?
Yeah, well, before I tell you about that, I'm just curious, like what's your default time to go to sleep and wake up? Like when you're just in your normal routine?
Yeah, usually I go to bed at like 10:30, 11, and then wake up around like 6:37.
Got it. Okay, we're actually in a similar general time box. Although I wish it was closer to 10:30. Nowadays, like more like 11:30. But yeah, my break was busy. So one thing you learn when you have kids is that 2 weeks of daycare closures for holidays result in almost more work than you experience during like work days. So yeah, I think thankfully my mother-in-law flew in from France with her partner and they stayed just nearby us here in Brooklyn.
Nice.
So they did a lot of activities with our daughter, took her to the playground. It was cold, but there were some good days where they could keep her busy. And then we did a bunch of stuff together, ate good food, drank wine, did Christmas together as a family. And
because they live in France, right? Your mother-in-law and her partner?
That's right. Yeah, they live in France. And when we were recording in the summer, before I came back to the US, we were staying with them in France. So we tried to see them in the summer, and they actually came here twice this year. Well, I guess last year now. Once in the summer and then once at the end. And we actually met them in the very beginning, almost a year ago, beginning of last year. We went to Guadeloupe, an island in the Caribbean, and they flew in from France because it's technically part of France. And we flew in from New York and did a nice kind of like 1 week vacation in an Airbnb overlooking the ocean in Guadeloupe. So that was really nice. So we try to, let's just say Carol and I, my wife, we used to do 0 vacations with family. And then I think since we've had Gaia, that's become something that is, it's like an actual help to have more adults around and gives us time to go off and have like a little dinner together, or go do an activity together, something like that.
You actually that's like the actual vacation time, basically, where you get to disconnect, relax, and not feel like, okay, you have to be wired for one reason or another, basically.
Exactly. And so it's cool. And then yesterday, Gaia celebrated 2 years, so she turned 2. So we threw her this surprise birthday party on Sunday with her little daycare friends and their parents, and really cute. Carol did all the work getting ready for that, but it was kind of a chaotic day to be there, to just like
I bet.
Watch a bunch of 2-year-olds just like socialize and keep themselves busy and make a bunch of messes. So.
And how were our 2 years old about their birthday and what's going on? Like, do they connect the dots of like, it's my birthday and everyone's here for me, or how much of
I can talk about Gaia. It's hard to generalize, but Gaia, she started singing Happy Birthday when we were lighting the Hanukkah candles, like at the end of last year. So
Nice. Good warm
I
up.
think she was aware of the concept of it, of celebrating a birthday. I don't think she knew it was her birthday, although she's used to getting a lot of attention. So I don't know if anything was that different. But yeah, no, I think the main funny things for me were, one, they all loved the cake, and the kids sat down, and they're used to sitting down in the same classroom. So they sat down at the place and they got the cake, and they're so cute, just being quiet and eating. And then they kind of do this funny socializing thing where, if you and I were to get together for a beer or what, I mean, you don't drink, but whatever, a meal, and we were to meet, we'd just start talking to each other. That would be like our way of connecting and socializing. Kids at this age, they kind of like, they get together and they do this like super awkward kind of like hug where they just put their bodies against each other and they don't really talk and they just kind of stand around each other, and that makes them happy. So it's just like a lot of like these awkward social interactions. That's too.
That
Yeah.
sounds kind of nice.
Yeah, it's
In a
fun.
way, low effort, then have to find random questions to keep the conversation going.
No,
Um,
but you get a feel for their personalities, like who's shy,
yeah,
who's outgoing, who's goofy, who's, it's really funny. So I'm sure by this point next year she'll fully know that it's her birthday. And I think we got her some balloons. Like she saw some like Elmo balloons. Kids at this age love Elmo. I don't know if you were into Elmo when you were growing up in
yeah, yeah.
Spain. Yeah, but it's huge. So she's got some balloons, and yeah, now she's back at daycare. It's a Tuesday, and I'm feeling good. I'm excited about the year. January is always, I mean, how do you usually feel at the start of the year? It's kind of an arbitrary break point in time,
Yeah,
but like what usually comes up for you when you think about transitioning from December to January?
yeah. And I think maybe to like set a little bit of the context to like for I think would be fun to do with this episode is like just reflect on how the pod has been going and maybe talk about a little bit about like what are we thinking about the year and what are we excited about, what are we going to work on, so interesting trends that we want to talk about. But yeah, I think for me, I actually love this time because I think it gives you the space to like reflect. So I definitely like in the Christmas break where there's not a lot of stuff going on. I'm like, I feel I have the space to do that. But it also like I like to use this time of year to like really get the momentum going. So then like it's not like, oh, like I'm just gonna wait until January to do the things. It's like how can I get everything in motion maybe like late December. So then like I feel like I'm already kind of coming out of January strong. So I'm almost like to do like my yearly planning. Yeah, like the first or second week of December. So then I can kind of leverage that momentum and feel like, okay, like I'm already hitting the ground running. I don't have to like, waste the first 2 weeks planning. So yeah, I feel like that's been a very helpful hack. And also it makes me feel like I'm not behind. Like I'm always like, oh shit, like it's January 1st. Like I still haven't come up with my New Year resolutions. And I don't know, it's a small psychology thing. And also like, it's just kind of funny too that for some reason that January 1st becomes this kind of timeline or deliverable where you have to have all this figured out, but it's just you can do that any point of the year. So I think I don't know, but for me, I kind of feel that pressure of like, oh shit, I'm behind, I'm messing up. So I like to get that done before, so I don't feel that way. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this to you over the break, but I was working through the break. I mean, I took a month off in August, and then September was kind of a ramp back up month. And what I wanted to avoid is another kind of like period of going all the way down to zero and then having to kind of slowly ramp back up. So I made the decision to take some of those days, like right before Christmas, right after Christmas. I was on Slack with you talking about recording that loom like the day before Christmas on like how to measure success for Christmas, which actually ended up getting some funny reactions. People really liked it. But so yeah, I agree. It's totally an arbitrary deadline. And what's funny is I talk a lot with people about how I think the job of leaders in a lot of ways is to manufacture momentum. And because the default is like nothing's happening. And so if you don't manufacture momentum, you're always staring at a blank sheet or starting at square one. And so one way I like to manufacture momentum, and I've seen really good leaders around me do this that I've learned from, is they just create arbitrary deadlines. And it's just like, we're going to do this by this date. And then the moment that you put that line in the sand and talk about, okay, well, we can't get there. Why not? Right now you're having productive conversations about what the blockers are, and you have to reprioritize. Well, I can't do all this, so I'm going to drop something. So I feel like the new year and January 1st kind of gives the entire society some kind of like arbitrary deadline to set aside what happened, think about what's coming up next, and to set some kind of intentions and goals. And I'm not a huge believer in New Year's resolutions. I don't know too many people that follow them fully, but I've seen it be pretty powerful. Like one of my really good friends recently got engaged and met his fiance, who they were, she was a little bit of an introvert, and I guess she had a crush on him at work. And she had set a New Year's resolution to like put herself out there more. I want to say like a year ago, or maybe that was 2 years ago. And as part of her New Year's resolution to put herself out there more, she took a chance and like asked him out, and now they're getting married. So I think like sometimes just like giving yourself permission to do something differently, I think can go a long way.
Yeah, I was actually thinking and funny about that story. So my family and I, probably like the day of Christmas or the day after, we share our New Year resolutions. And my brother had a similar resolution, was like, okay, I think this year is the year that I want to find love. And fast forward a year, he brought his new girlfriend to Spain to meet the entire family. So that was like a really cool, like full circle moment. But yeah, I was thinking like, what percentage of people do you think spend some time reflecting on the year and actually setting New Year resolutions?
Yeah, it's hard to tell at a broad scale, but if I just look like right around me, like the people that let's say I've spoken with and caught up with over the last few weeks, it seems like at least the people our age, maybe it's less true of people that are maybe more in like retirement age, maybe it's more like cruising altitude kind of for them, or just hanging out. But people are our age that have a lot of energy, want to get things done. They don't want to relax. They want to get stuff moving in the right direction. I think it's like probably 9 out of 10. It feels like everyone's kind of thinking about that now. What happens after the year tick mark goes to the new year is all that matters. So what you do in January is everything. And for me, I think I followed I'm following your kind of philosophy, which is I'm going guns blazing in January. This is like the busiest month I've had probably in the last year. And I've never been more engaged and more excited to wake up in the morning. And I've never felt more tired when I go to sleep at night. But I feel like that's going to feed what happens for the rest of the year, because I'm not like gradually doing anything. I'm kind of like, I got a cohort running. I've got 2 startups I'm working with. I'm doing this podcast with you. I'm building a co-pilot and iterating on that. I'm doing a bunch of one-on-one mocks. I just said yes to a new type of kind of like engagement with someone that wants to work with me on more like ongoing job search coaching. So I'm just like doing everything right now. And it's cool. I don't know. I feel like it's better to be too busy than not busy enough, right?
Yeah. And what do you think is different from this year compared to last year, right? Because like I think last year at this point of time, you were doing fractional work full time, and probably
Well,
had a couple
this
of
time last
clients.
year, I was in a full-time job.
Oh, right.
So this time last year, I was still the head of product and design at Continuum. We had just, I think, gone
Wow.
through the initial phases of pivoting. And I think maybe a week or two from now, last year, is when I left as part of the post-pivot kind of restructuring. And that's when you could argue I started. I actually just did all my accounting and tax stuff, because like looking back at all my business expenses and income from last year. And I think the first dollars I made for fractional work last year were in February.
Wow.
Yeah.
In my head, I was like, I've known Ben for so much longer, and I feel like he's been doing this for years almost. But yeah, that's now that
No,
I'm
not
thinking
even a
about a
full
year.
year. That's been for me the big reflection, is less like the calendar year changing and more like I feel like I'm coming up on a year of like this phase of my career and thinking a lot about that. So good timing for us to be doing this conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Should we go into the podcast? Should we talk about more like, or should we
Yeah.
change the order? Should we do first talk about like what are we working on for the year, and then talk podcast? What do you think?
I feel like the podcast is one of the things I'm doing. So it feels like it's all in a mixed bag of things. So I'm happy to start with the podcast because it's like one of the things, and it doesn't feel less or more of a priority than the other stuff. It just kind of feels like something I care about along with other things. So I'm happy to start with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think the way we're thinking about doing the podcast reflection is, I forget what episode this was, but it was, I think, at some point after maybe we published the first 10 or 15 episodes. And now we just published 40 today.
Yeah.
Right. So it's January 14th. I think we should give each other a high five for that. Right.
Boom.
Boom.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, like, when we started, like, how far do you think we're going to get? Or Yeah.
So one of my greatest strengths is also my greatest weakness in a sense, but I didn't think too far ahead. I thought about this sounds fun. I like Mark. You were here in New York at the time. It gave me more of an excuse to like maybe spend more time with people here in New York. And yeah, I think that the chances that we would make it, that we'd be as consistent as we've been, were super low. I mean, this is probably like the fourth time I've started a podcast in my life, and none of them ever made it past like episode 10. So I would say very low. What about you?
Yeah. I, in a very similar way, I was like, this is an experiment. We're going to try it out. And I think that was almost kind of like, I think probably a theme that's going to come up, but I think just like taking it step by step, right? And almost kind of going against conventional wisdom of like, hey, you have to record an entire season before you publish. I think that back to what you were saying, right, kind of gave us that momentum and that inertia that then was kind of really hard to stop and made it really fun. But yeah, I mean, I thought I was like, we'll record like two or three and then kind of figure out from there. Like, but I had like 40 episodes. That was not like never something that it was even in my mind, right? Of like that. Yeah. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've published once a week, I'd say since roughly March or April of last year, other than we've probably missed a total of three, maybe four max weeks.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
So we've been really consistent, which is something I'm super proud of. So, I mean, I think the high level buckets, I think the way I've structured my thoughts on this are kind of like learnings and reflections, maybe like aspirations or things I'm hoping we can do in the future with the podcast this year. And then I think we both agreed that we would share what our favorite episode was, which was really hard, but I think I have some good stuff to start there. So yeah, why don't you go first? What are your biggest like learnings and reflections from this last year?
I think one of the probably most important things for me was like finding our style. Like I think that really helped us, at least helped me enjoy the conversation a lot more. Like looking back at the first episodes, I was almost like in that like flight or fight mode when I was talking, because I was like, okay, like we have all these questions that we want to ask and just trying to fit it in without really being present. So I think like that switch that we made from have another interview podcast into more of a conversation podcast was, I think, was like a really healthy one. And I also think it made our guests feel more comfortable and maybe open themselves up more. And also, I think the cool part about it too, I think one of my favorite things about the podcast, it's been a great excuse to meet great people. And I think it's for some of the guests, it's not just we've met them. I think we've also kept a relationship after, and I think that's been really amazing. And we've had repeated episodes. So, to me, I did not expect that at all. But I think part of my hypothesis is that why that has been the case is because we've always kind of set a tone of like, hey, like we're friends, we're having a conversation, we're both kind of be honest, transparent, and we're kind of hanging out, right? And I think that made the podcast also unique for people. I think there's a lot of product podcasts out there, but a lot of them are interview based. I think the fact that we can have conversational, it gives it a little bit of an edge or a differentiator, if you will. I think, and also I think back to what you were saying, I think consistency is key. Like I think it's almost like now, like the podcast fits into my week, and it's become kind of like a habit, and almost like I miss it when I don't do it. So I think like getting into that consistency early on was really, really important. I think something that I'm really proud of too is that, and I give you like a lot of the credit to you here, is that we've been really good at following our own taste and not feeling the pressure of being influenced by what other people say or what other people want, right? Like I think we've gathered feedback, but at the end of the day, like it's almost, we always gone back like, here's the feedback, but what do we think? And I feel like probably 8 out of 10 times we've chosen what we wanted, and I think that's also made it more enjoyable for us. So I think those are the main things that come to mind. Yeah. What about you?
Those are good ones. Yeah, so I just wrote down a mix of kind of like high level things and maybe like specific things. So I think one, I'm happy we added intro music.
Yes.
That feels good when I listen. It just feels better and exiting. I also like that we've recently been experimenting with taking turns recording intros to episodes after we record. So that reduces the synchronous requirement for both of us to get on that call together. We just record once and then everything else can happen async, which I love.
Yeah, and for context for the audience, like before, what we used to do, we used to record the podcast, and we either would try to find like 30 minutes right after, but that was hard because we both had a lot of meetings, or we had to coordinate separately, find a time that worked for both of us, and then record. Which honestly, the hardest part was just the coordination back and forth of finding a time that worked for both of us.
Yeah. So now when we take turns, I feel like the other person gets an off week from like that work, which is nice. It's like we're still doing 50-50, just on a different kind of time frame. The next thing I like, more tactical too, is that we recently added video to Spotify. So people that want to watch their content on Spotify don't have to go to YouTube. You can just keep everything where you like your podcast, and if you like the video, you can get it there. So I think that's a really big improvement.
And by the way, do you have any metrics on like how people are engaging with the video versus audio?
I don't. I just have like, or maybe that's buried somewhere in Spotify analytics, but it just gives me like episode level, like listens and completions kind of thing. That's another thing for people. Mark and I have a constant pain point with just like analytics around the pod. Like it's such an unsolved problem. We've got like the Substack, we've got Apple, we've got download numbers, we've got Spotify plays and listens and subscribers, but we don't have
YouTube.
like there's YouTube. So we don't have, it's hard to have a centralized dashboard for like all the things. So we're just piecing together what we see. And I actually can't add you as a collaborator in Spotify. I tried to look for like some kind of like manage members, add other users, and it's just like single player mode.
Same with Apple.
Yeah. So that sucks. Speaking of YouTube, I forget when we started running the YouTube Shorts experiment, but something tells me that that's probably working, and it might not be obvious exactly how, but I think that's working.
Yeah. I mean, again, we don't have a lot of data, but I definitely feel like the number of watch time in our channel has gone up a good amount, and also the number of followers that we have in subscribers to the channel too. And also the number of total views too has gone up a good amount. And a lot of those are because of our shorts.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks. That was a good idea from you to start playing with that. And a couple more concrete ones. We started adding some cover art to the top of the Substack post, which I think make them look better when they land in your inbox. You get to see some like faces and stuff, which is cool versus something generic. The next one is that we've simplified the preparation. So we used to send this whole like doc, like Google Doc, to the guests before we record that had like a list of questions, and like there was like probably it felt like a heavier lift for guests to like do the podcast and for us too. And we kind of killed that whole like Google Doc prep thing and instead shifted to a conversation more around like, hey, we want to go deep. Like, are there any like topics that you're really excited about or thing like, and just we'll follow our curiosity as we go. And I felt like that's been a huge improvement. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it feels a lot easier. Like my workflow right now is that, and the cool part about, again, like I think that's something that works very well for how we're working together is depending who owns the relationship, that person will be responsible for sending kind of the scheduling email and then also the prep email. And basically what I have right now is just a template on my Superhuman client. I'll just forward it. And yeah, it just makes the only thing I really have to think about is like, what are the topics that we're excited about, which Ben and I will kind of Slack back and forth. And I think for guests, it's also lighter weight, right? Like you just stay in your email, you read it, and then you reply. You don't have to jump into another doc. So I think, yeah, simplicity is key. And I think This is another way that we've kept it simple.
Yeah. And then another way I think we've kept it simple is around the logistics, which is another point I wrote down, which is we wanted consistency. And I think we had one moment, I forget it, maybe one or two moments in the last year where we didn't really have like the next round of guests lined up. And we kind of had this like, shit, like, are we behind? Are we like, what do we need to do differently? And I forget which one of us came up with a suggestion, but we put these recurring slots on the calendar, and we have 2 recording slots on the calendar every week. And the idea is if we can some weeks double down on guests, then if we ever need to take weeks off, we'll have like a little bit more of a backlog, not too far in the future, but some backlog. And I feel like that's been beneficial for 2 reasons. One, I just never schedule on top of recording slots, so they become protected space on my calendar just for this. And then 2, it allows us to budget for off weeks.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a big win too.
And the third win there is that if we don't record that slot, all of a sudden then we have like an hour and a half of focus time, which is amazing. Yeah.
It's a gift, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I cancel those. I'm like,
let's go.
Yes. Okay. And then a couple more that I wrote down here. One is, I think this is less about my workflow, but I think you and Tareem, who's one of the Supra staff members who's helping us with the podcast with editing, you've started leaning into Hunch. for AI automation and taking, I think what you called like 5 hours to 5 minutes or 15 minutes. Do you want to speak to like the way that process improvement has reduced maybe like the lift required to run the podcast?
Yeah. So for context, yeah, Hunch is, I'm having a hard time defining what Hunch is, but the way I think about it is almost like a workflow builder, an AI workflow builder. And what's really cool about Hunch, right, is that I think the insight that they had is this: every day there's more foundational models, and each foundational model is good for one thing or another. So the really cool thing that they do is that you can kind of create all these complicated workflows, and you can leverage different foundational models for different things. Like, for example, like ChatGPT's or the Whisper one is really good at transcription, but maybe Claude is a much better writer. So what we did with the podcast, the workflow basically, or maybe what it would be helpful is to explain what we had before. So before, we would edit the podcast, and then from that, we would have to create a LinkedIn post. We would have to create the show notes. We'd have to create a title, maybe some tweets if we wanted to, maybe a blog. Like we haven't done this, but another thing that a lot of people do is they create blog posts through podcasts, because there's so much content and it's so content rich. So the idea with this workflow that we created with Hunch is that we just upload the action of the audio file of the podcast. We kind of transcribes it into text, and then from that text, it kind of triggers like 4 or 5 different workflows. One is come up with like 5 or 6 ideas for titles. It never really nails it to the point that like, hey, like we love it, but it gives us enough ideas that then we can just like make a little tweak and get us to where we want. For me, I use it also for like my LinkedIn posts. So I basically I give them a lot of context of like my style, what I've done before, basically like my top 30 posts. And based on that, it kind of creates like 3 or 4 posts that I can use. And now I started to post about 2 posts per podcast, which kind of reduces the pressure of, having to come up with content every week, which is really nice. It also creates tweets. We haven't really been leveraging those, but we wanted to. And then it also creates the show notes, which saves a ton of time. So yeah, I think usually probably like Tareem would spend 5 hours doing all of those things that I just described. Now it probably takes like 15 minutes.
Yeah, incredible. Love that. I mean, we could not be doing this without Tareem right now. I think it would just not be sustainable for us. Like shout out Tareem if you're listening. Thank you.
We appreciate you.
And then the last thing I'll say, as far as like learnings go, is we experimented with kind of just like inviting. I remember like that conversation we did with like Josh and John Cutler, and there was like a post that we all read. We talked about it in Slack, and we're like, do you guys just want to like get on a call and record, like just talk about it together? And that was us experimenting with a different format for conversation, and it was really fun. And I think like I suspect it was fun to listen to as well. And I think the people were all, I'm a little biased, but I think everyone other than me was insightful, and I enjoyed that. So I think I like that we keep like experimenting with different ways of recording.
Yeah, I think maybe on that note, something that I'll add too is I think a learning for both of us has been that the key for us to be consistent is to enjoy what we're doing and to be energized. And there's definitely some certain people that give us more energy than others. And I think what we've been able to identify who those people are and bring them back. And I think, some podcasts are not very open to have repeat guests, but for us is like, if we have if some of those people like lead to more engaging, fun, energizing conversations, like there's no reason why we shouldn't do that. Because at the end of the day, like we have to have fun in these conversations, because otherwise we cannot sustain this space. So I think that was like a cool learning for us, and be like, hey, like we can break the rules here and maybe have a couple of people that join us more often.
Yeah, Josh Herzig Marks is the obvious person that comes to mind for me as someone who gives me a bunch of energy when he comes on. So insightful, thoughtful, asks great questions, super present, brings a unique perspective as a builder, as a founder. So anyways, people like Josh, like, yeah, he's got kind of like an open invite to come on the podcast and join us for conversations, because it makes me more excited to record, honestly.
Yeah, same.
Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to add is that it's more of like a celebration moment from the last year, that when Spotify was doing their Spotify Wrapped at the end of last year for people, we had one person, we're not going to say who they are, send Marc a screenshot, one person in the Supra community, send Marc a screenshot that Supra Insider, our podcast, was ranked higher on the list of podcasts for that person than Lenny's podcast. Like we were the number 1 podcast for that person. And that felt huge to me. I don't know. It's like one person, but still, like, to know that we
Yeah.
have this small subset of people that we are like a primary source of entertainment or education or whatever for them, it means a lot.
Yeah, and actually, the cool part is that they didn't even send it to me. Basically, what happened is we recently opened Supra Instagram, where we started to share some of the reels, and they tagged our Supra Instagram, and then Tareem saw it. She took the screenshot and shared it with me.
No
Uh,
way.
yeah,
I had no idea. That's
yeah.
even
So it
cooler.
was even like more serendipitous like that. They like posted it on their Instagram stories, and they tagged. And by the way, I think there are maybe like 20 people that we were their number one podcast, something like that.
Oh,
Or
that's
I
right.
might,
There were others. And,
yeah,
I'm assuming like all 20 of them probably listen to some amount of Lenny's content. And by the way, like, I love Lenny. I love his, it's my number one podcast, I think, for product stuff. But the fact that we're even getting that kind of power or user engagement just made me feel happy.
yeah, same.
Cool. Okay. So anything else you had on learnings and reflections before we move on?
No, I think we've looked again. I think another good thing that we've done is we haven't focused too much on metrics, right? Like I think we're not like for us, our compass is did we have fun in that episode? Did we learn? If the answer is yes, we've done our job. That's it. And that said, I think one of the metrics that got me really excited was when we crossed 10,000 downloads. I think that to me was like, wow, like that means that, yeah, it doesn't mean that everyone listened, but the fact that we got 10,000 downloads was really cool. I don't know why.
Why? I mean, to me, it just it's a big round number, and it kind of the next 10xing would be 100,000 downloads, and that my brain is not obsessed at all. Like, I'm not fixated on how to get to 100,000, but the idea that the next major milestone would be 100,000 is kind of crazy to me.
Like I'm like I just cannot even picture the number 10,000 almost. So like I think that to me was the exciting part. It was like it's such a big number that I could not even comprehend. And then like probably like Lenny's like, oh, that's cute. Like, I get like 10,000 like the first day of one of my episodes.
Right.
But still, I don't know. There was something about that like, oh wow, like people listen.
Agreed. So yeah, for this next part, like things we want to maybe do, I have a much shorter list here. I think one, I want to maintain a level of excitement about every episode of 7 or higher.
Yeah.
So if we feel like 6.5 or lower, I want us to like cancel or push or ask ourselves what would get us to like a 7 or higher and focus on that.
And can you break down a little bit? Are you talking about how do you feel about the guest? How do you feel about the topics and
I think
combination of the two?
My learning from 40 episodes is this is largely about the guest. It's about their energy levels. It's about their style. It's about the conversational dynamic. Is it going to be a lecture? Is it going to be a game of ping pong, or is it going to be a lecture? Right? Like, is it someone who's got some really strong, spicy opinions that are well formed, or someone who's maybe not as like? It's almost like if I start digging, I feel like I'm going to make them look bad, right? So it's like you wanna talk to formidable, well-articulated, fun, spicy, original people. And I think you and I have talked about this theme of people living life on their own terms, or like doing life on their own terms. And I feel like those people generally tend to be really fun to talk to.
I agree. I think the challenge that I see here, or like is I find it. So a lot of the people that we of course have like a circle of people that we know, right? That we've talked multiple times, that we can confidently say, hey, this person fits all that criteria. But if we want to like move outside of that circle, right, it's a lot harder to have an accurate read of someone unless they've done a lot of podcasts. So how do we, I guess my question for you is like, how do we get really good at getting that signal when there's not enough data?
I think it's through our existing networking and like the conversations we have one-on-one with people. Like, you and I both talk to so many people off the record every week. And then if you just find yourself getting excited when you're like, I would love to talk more with that person. Like, that was really fun. Or there's this area I didn't get to go deep on with them that I'm sure they have so many interesting things to say about. We could bring those to each other and talk about them, which is, like one person I remember was a really fun conversation we had was Allison Braley. And,
Yeah.
she's not in she's not in the super community. She's not even a product person, but she's like one of my favorite marketing people I've ever worked with. So I thought of her as like, she would be fun to have on. So I think if we can just keep doing that and just think about who would be fun to talk to, I'm not worried about us getting boxed in because we're just exposed to so many people on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And then two other things I wrote down. One, we haven't experimented with this yet, but I have a part of me that's itching to run this test this year at some point, which is to take a topic that's maybe a hot topic that has two sides and to facilitate a debate, like a respectful debate between two people that we know are like really kind and respectful, but also like well articulated and opinionated on two different sides of a big issue in the product world. And just to see what that might feel like, I think it could be fun.
I'll invite my friend Marty to talk about feature factories with you.
Marty, if you're listening, you have an invite at any time to come on.
I'll make sure that Ben is nice to you.
I do love Marty. Just I want everyone to be clear. When people say things that are, when they say I'm going to say something that will be spicy and that not everyone's going to like, then they should be prepared for some people to not like it and like them and to push back, and that's what happened. And then this is more of like a workflow goal. Let me know if you think it's too ambitious, but like I'd love to finish ideally by the end of the year or earlier to get to a point where we could publish a full episode start to finish where you and I don't do anything after we finish recording.
Does that include recording the intro?
Intro would be recorded too, but like
Cool.
But assuming we just record the main conversation in the intro, but like pretty much everything else is either automated or we get full support, I feel like that would bring down, because we still spend, if I had to guess, something like 30 to 60 minutes per episode between the two of us on like deciding title, picking clips, reviewing drafts, those kind of things. And I feel like maybe it's a stretch goal, but I'd love to get it down to close to zero without compromising taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're almost there. Like, I think we're probably collectively spending like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Yeah. So it's optimization. What about you? What are the main things you're thinking about this year for the pod?
Yeah, I think for me, given that we have shifted towards this conversational style, I've noticed that for some episodes, actually probably for most, and I think just some people are faster to warm up than others, that it takes some time to get into the rhythm of the conversation. And then what ends up happening is that the conversation starts getting really good towards the end, and then we have to stop. So I want to experiment to see how can we get to like a more dynamic conversation right away. Is there something that we can do in the prep? Is there something that we can do to ease people up? But I think if we can get to like, boom, like everyone is warm from the get-go, I think like the quality of our episodes will go up a lot. And I think we won't notice that big of a difference in like the rhythm in the beginning versus the end.
Yeah, it's such a good point because, there's kind of a couple levers. One is we could either start recording earlier and almost like we did just now and hit record and start talking, and hopefully we get rid of the need to have a cold start once we quote unquote record so that we're already flowing. Or two, we could extend the episode length and make them longer. And I think the problems with longer is, by the way, I love long form podcasts because I just chunk them and I listen maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time. So I don't think there's anything wrong with long form, but it would be a bigger time commitment for us and for the guests to be able to do those. And I'm wondering if people that say yes to an hour won't say yes to an hour and a half or 2 hours. But I do love the idea of starting by experimenting with just turning on the recording when people join, and then,
Yeah, or maybe there's a question or two that can really help people get comfortable right away. Or like a ritual, or I don't know, there might be something that we can do, right? That really, like something silly or a joke, I don't know, but
the fun
can experiment.
I remember with Rich Mironov in that episode, we had a fun fact lined up about him writing a paper about the dinosaurs, and I think that was kind of like a fun place to start. But anyways, let's keep thinking on that, because I think you're right. I think the sooner we can get into some kind of like fun conversational rhythm and vibe, the better.
Yeah, another big one to me that it's personally very annoying and upsetting. No, not upsetting, but is that for some reason when we post our LinkedIn posts for episodes, like they like consistently underperform relative to our other posts. And the reason why it's upsetting is, one, everyone's like, oh, like video is really the future. Like if you include video in your posts, like it's going to do really well. Since LinkedIn is pushing for that content, that definitely has not been the case. So people said, hey, like hide the links. That's maybe why I started hiding the links. So there's something there that's not really working. And I think the reason why it's upsetting for me is like I haven't really experimented much. Like I keep doing the same thing, but I'm like, just it's yielding the same negative results. So I'm committed to spending more time experimenting there this year, because I think like if we can crack that, the distribution of the podcast can really take off.
That's a good one. The latest advice I have on this is yes, video's good. 2, you still need a really strong hook. And then 3, you want to post without the link, and then 15, 20 minutes later, you add the link. And honestly, that's hard to schedule.
Yeah.
Like if I want to schedule the night before to post today, and I'm supposed to do all this stuff, it's like, I don't have the time to like, I have to set a reminder now to go and do it. So that doesn't really help. But theoretically, if I had the time, that's probably what I would do.
Yeah. Or
But
I don't know if maybe it's like the like the production quality of our clips. I don't know, but there's something there. But I think it's a nut that I would love to crack.
All right. Favorite episode, go. Or did you have any other priorities for the year?
No, I think that's actually one last one. I'd love to talk more about topics that I'm really interested in and that I'm like spending a lot of time thinking about. I think for me, I mean, at the risk of sounding cringe, like AI is one of them. And I would love to use the podcast as a way for me to learn how people are using it and how I can use it. Since I really think like people who spend time doing that are going to get just way more leverage than people that don't. So I think that's just for something that I'm excited to start doing more of. Okay, favorite episode.
Episode? You go first.
So on that note, the episode with Tal was probably my favorite one.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have different reasons, but yeah, what are yours?
Yeah, I think there's like a combination of things. I think one is just that topic was like deeply interesting to me. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and it was just like cool to talk to someone who also had been spending a lot of time on it. I also think just the rapport between the three of us was really good. Like you've, had met him before. I had met him before through you too. So I think like just the conversation and I think the energy between the three of us was really good. And I think also it was the only one of the only episodes where I just like after an hour and a half, like I blinked. I was like, wow, like I cannot believe we just spent an hour and a half talking about that. So yeah, I think for all those reasons, it was my favorite episode.
Yeah, I think the main reason it was my favorite episode, because I've spent a bunch of time talking to Tal, kind of like one-on-one, but that episode literally motivated me to go build something that I've already onboarded, I don't know, 25-ish people to like my AI co-pilot for my interview prep coaching.
Wow.
And when I think about us recording that, beginning of December, like maybe like literally at that point we recorded, I didn't even have a Claude. I'd never installed Claude. I had no Claude account. I was all in on ChatGPT and I was kind of like, man, and that conversation literally got me to go like set up Claude, create a project, start playing with it. And since then I've gone all in on Claude. I've canceled my ChatGPT subscription and I've come up with a way I've created these like how to set up your Copilot docs, and I give people the project knowledge files in a G drive. And so when people take my course or when people work with me on mocks, like pretty much every time someone does something that's like a paid engagement with me, they get access to all the Copilot materials. And that's like a whole new thing that I didn't even have on my radar, a little over a month ago. So yeah, that felt to me like by far the most impactful episode for me personally. And then the second thing, which is not completely unrelated, but just as I suspect a symptom of how good that conversation was, it's our best performing episode
by a lot.
So I think that topic that I agree with you. I'd love to do more AI related deep dives with people this year. And I think there's a huge appetite in the community. And I think we are actually good people to facilitate those conversations and learn more about them. So let's definitely keep leaning into AI related episodes.
Yeah. Also kudos to you. Like I feel like in less than a month, you've not only kind of deployed this thing, you have 25 people using it. That's some serious speed. So congrats.
I think once things just click and I get really excited about something, it takes a life of its own, right? So yeah, thank you.
And the feedback is good so far? Or?
Yeah. And the feedback is overall good. I've gotten some good tips and I've mostly been able to get things to be better through tweaking project instructions. Okay. The files are don't need to change or haven't changed. Like I've updated one of my templates, for example, are some of the project knowledge files. So when I update them, I add them, but I don't think that's made a serious difference in the outcome. And I think, yeah, the project instructions, and Tal and I actually spent a bunch of time over last week talking about project instructions, but because I actually got him to start playing with it and he gave me some feedback. And he's obviously got no intention of going through these interviews and he doesn't even know anything about these interviews. But even Tal is kind of like, man, like, this is interesting. Like, this is really interesting what you've done here. So I feel proud of it. And I also want to level set expectations with people that it's just to get more practice. It's not to replace the hard work of preparing for the interviews. It's just to give more data points. And I could not think of a more scalable way of helping people chew on more questions from the question bank that Lewis Lynn had put together. Shout out Lewis Lynn, awesome question bank. But if you're working on analytical thinking PS interviews and you want to practice, I feel like what I've been able to hack together in something as simple as Claude projects it's blown my mind. So that episode gave me the kick in the butt to go explore that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that would be so cool, right? If every couple of episodes we learn something and then it has that impact on us. Like, I think that would be like that itself already makes it everything worth it, right? Like,
I would love, I mean, like, I don't know if this is secret, but we're about to host the founder of a product that we've talked about at some point in this podcast that you're really excited about in Supra for a roundtable. And if we feel like that's a good, engaging conversation, like we should totally invite them on and we talk about, let's talk about this product. Let's talk about how it works. Let's talk about how people are using it. What are the biggest aha moments that you've seen people have with your product? Who is your product like maybe not a good fit for that you thought initially would be a good fit for, right? And just like start to like build our own product taste around these AI products, I think is always gonna, like, I can't see how that's a bad investment of time.
100%. Let's do it.
Love it. Okay, now I think we wanted to do kind of like personal reflections, maybe productivity unlocks, and then things that we're working towards this year and maybe trends we're excited about. Those are the big buckets.
Yeah.
Cool. You want to go first?
Sure. Cool. Okay. So I think one of the big learnings for me this year, I mean, probably not shocking, but just the amount of leverage that you get from writing online and publishing content. Like, yeah, I've grown my LinkedIn audience from, in January, I started, I think, with like under 2,000. Now we're like very close to 12,000 followers.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, it's like, there's the actual benefits of it, I think, like, are multidimensional. One is I've met some really cool people through it that probably I would have not met if they were like, hey, I've been reading your content, love to chat. And another one is just feeling like I'm helping people. Like, I've been getting messages maybe like once a week from someone, be like, hey, I read this post and it was really helpful. Thank you for spending the time doing that. And then the obvious one maybe here is like, it's been really helpful for Supra. Like, when I started Supra, probably like 80% of the members came from me reaching out to them or through my network, and then 20% maybe inbound or referrals. That this year has completely switched. So probably 80% of people either come from applications because they've heard through my LinkedIn or through people that are in the community that are referring people. So that right there kind of makes it definitely worth it. So yeah, I think I'll definitely continue doing that. I also it's been a really forcing me to write has been a really helpful way to think more deeply about different topics I'm learning. Like, I feel like I've just learned so much from either listening to previous episodes or previous roundtables, or just reading and rereading kind of topics that I'm seeing in the community and really internalizing those lessons. I think my concern now is that my workflow for writing on LinkedIn is so automated that I'm not spending the amount of time like being so structured about how I think, which is like amazing, because now, before I probably used to spend like 30 minutes to an hour writing a post. Now I'm spending 15 minutes. It's amazing. I get a lot of time back every week, but also that means that I'm not really exercising that muscle for writing. So I don't know how I feel about that yet. I think we'll have to find a way to supplement that writing muscle building. But for now, I'm pumped to have probably like 4 hours back or 3 hours back every week. Something that was really cool that I really enjoyed this year is I made a couple of trips to different cities to meet with people in the community. meetups or conferences. And I just got so much energy from that. And it was just a really cool moment to meet people in person that I just had been engaging with through Slack and, Zoom for a long time. So yeah, I think I want to do more of that this year and start to be a little bit more proactive about planning beforehand. What else? I think this year has been a year where I've finally started to enjoy problems. I think before something wrong would happen, I was just like, oh shit, this is gonna derail my day. I would just have this anxiety. I think now I'm just that's kind of part of the job. And it's cliche, but there's most people say that problems are only opportunities in workloads, and I really feel that's the case. So I'm now every time there's a problem or a workflow breaks, I'm cool, I get a chance to make something better and maybe find a way to do it differently. So I think that's been a really healthy reframe that almost it's make running a company and also just life in general more fun. I think it just everything is more of a positive situation rather than a stressor. Another big thing that I've worked on this year has been just making more difficult decisions. I think that's true for both my personal life and also my professional life. I've made some pretty big decisions that were scary, that had some big consequences to my life, my business. And yeah, I think I've grown a lot through those decisions, but it was really hard to get there, right? And I think it's interesting reflecting back is a lot of them were maybe obvious, but I was just kind of avoiding them, or I was letting inertia kind of take control. But there was just so much learning and so many breakthroughs came from those decisions. So that's something that I'm moving forward this year. I'm hoping to maybe make those decisions faster and be more comfortable making those decisions and just having the trust that everything's going to be okay, and that but that's the first step that you need to make. And then I think another one, maybe last one is, or second to last one is, I would say in general, when you're running a company or just in general, I think I'm a pretty frugal person. I'm always kind of ooh, is this going to be worth it? Is this going to be a good use of funds? And especially something that I've learned last year is that paying for experts and paying for speed of learning is totally worth it, right? Like the opportunity cost of doing the wrong thing for a long period of time is way more expensive than paying someone, a couple $100 or maybe $1,000 to help you do something, right? And so, I think I'm excited to invest more money into guidance of experts, because I think that's, and I think this kind of business influencer that I follow, it's calls it paying the stupidity tax. But I totally agree. I think paying for learning and for accelerating where you want to get is one of the things that is totally worth it. So I'm going to continue doing that this year. And then the last part is I think this is the year where I really want to double down on learning. I think kind of back to what we're talking about, right? I've already gotten a taste of the leverage that you can get from AI, from writing. So I want to continue kind of dedicating time every week to do that, because I feel like if I don't do that, I'm going to fall behind and I'm going to lose my edge on people that are doing that. So those were my key learnings of the year. What are you, Ben?
I love those. Just to reflect back a little. One is I've kind of been part of the thought process, or at least chewed on some of these big decisions with you after you made them. And I think you probably err on the side of, you'd probably agree with this, taking too long to maybe make big decisions like that. As far as I can tell, they've been the right ones. So one of my hopes for you this year is to maybe trust that inner voice, or, your gut feeling sooner, or get more connected with that, because I think it's pointing you in a good direction. And it's been brave, I think, for you to make some of the big decisions that you've made. So kudos to you for that. And I can totally see why you feel like you're growing in that process. The problems piece, I love how you're getting kind of excited about problems. I'm still in a part of my journey where problems do annoy me, and I'm trying to work on that. And I think there's this podcast I really like by this guy, Michael Singer, who's written spiritual books. And I was listening to one of his lectures yesterday morning on the daycare drop-off walk. And
dude, I love, we haven't talked about that, but I love Michael Singer. He's the one from the Surrender Experiment, right?
Yeah, he's written The Untethered Soul.
Yeah.
Oh man, we haven't talked about this. So when I was starting my company in Gainesville, like over 10 years ago, Gainesville's where I went to college, and then I chose to start a company there because it's really cheap. And the engineer that I was working with, who was one of my fraternity brothers, was going through a breakup. He's like, "Hey, you want to come to this place with me where I go to like meditate sometimes? Like it's like 20 minutes drive." And I'm like, "Sure." So it's called the Temple of the Universe, and it's the place. It's Mickey Singer's kind of like compound that he started with whatever money he made in the 80s as an old hippie who sold his company. And it's a beautiful place in the middle of nature, and it's a multi-faith kind of center where he does these talks. And I just discovered like a year ago that they're recorded. I could listen online, so it's been like a treasure trove. So we should totally talk more about that. But I was listening to one of his recent lectures yesterday morning, and it's talking about how there's no such thing as problems, and you create problems. Life just does what life does. And when you react to it as life just doing what it's doing, if there's a problem, it's because you're making it. And I think I've been trying to just like, it's very fresh for me, but I'm happy that you shared that, because I'm trying to also become less phased by problems and anxiety and things like that. But yeah, let's see. I'll share a few that I came up with. First of all, I had a bullet point about LinkedIn following. I knew it wasn't going to be as good as yours, but I think both of us had a commitment this year to holding each other accountable to writing more. And I grew from like, I don't know, like roughly 3,000 or 3,500 beginning of the year to like, I'm almost at 10,000 now. But
Dude, that's epic growth too.
I
Uh,
appreciate that. I haven't been as consistent, and I haven't been investing as much as you have. So that's why I'm like, you're a good role model for, I think, what consistency on this front looks like. But for me, that's certainly been, just like you mentioned, it's been a driver for opportunities. And like I've done engagements with people this year who I met because of my LinkedIn content. So that's certainly been helpful. And yeah, like high level, like I'm coming up on a year doing, some people call it a portfolio career, some people call it solopreneurship, fractional work, whatever you want to call it. But I haven't had a boss in a year, roughly. And, I've worked with 4 startups as either an advisor or like an actual fractional PM. That's been super satisfying. I published a guest post on Lenny's in the summer that felt like a big milestone in my writing journey as, someone who's trying to kind of like get broader reach.
yeah, I mean, I
I,
think you can
yeah.
retire in the products phase after publishing with Lenny.
Yeah, we'll see. Um, and I think this year was the year that I graduated from doing kind of like one-on-one interview coaching to more trying to come up with more scalable ways to grow the impact of my interview coaching. And I've have 2,500 people come to my lightning lessons on Maven. I've had 50 paid students for my 3 cohorts so far. It's brought some good cash in. That's not the main reason I do it, but it makes it sustainable. And just launching a course on Maven, that was a whole learning curve of what's it like to launch a course online, and thinking about how to use that in the future. I'm really proud of the amount of free content that I've given away, and I've kind of like leveled up my free content playbook for Maven in December to give away my lectures for free, so people only come to the course for more practice and going deeper. And that's helping a lot of people that are struggling in the current job market, I think. So I feel proud of that. We talked about the Copilot already, and we talked about the podcast. So I think those are probably like the biggest things. And I've replaced a full-time salary. I think that feels really kind of important to say too. But I've done all this in a way that I really only worked like 8 months last year, roughly, between taking time off after leaving my last gig, going to Europe for August. September was pretty much a dead month of ramping back up. So I feel like I really only did the solopreneur thing for 8 months because I still had a full-time job in January. So I'm kind of excited about what I can do with 12 months or 11 months this year, assuming I still want to take some time off. And I've just reconnected with the excitement of managing myself, just like something that you're already in year 4 now of Supra?
No,
Year.
2.5. Yeah.
So
So
you're in the
we're
3rd
starting
year.
my year 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've probably, this might remind you in the beginning, but like, when you kind of go into like managing yourself, it's an adjustment. All the internal milestones are ones that you're setting. And I went from that being a little overwhelming in the beginning of the year to kind of just genuinely being excited about the chaos of it all, and just creating just enough structure to keep myself productive, which, having done this reflection episode with you, I'm realizing I do have a lot of output to show, even though my day-to-day feels so chaotic in my head.
Yeah. One observation from all of the stuff that you shared is that I think something that I admire a lot of what you just described is that it almost feels like you've kind of like started like a bunch of projects that all have been very successful independently. So I think just one like the capacity to do that and like not drop the quality bar in any of those is like super admirable. Like I think it's super impressive. But I think the part that I think is, to me, kind of like from the outside watching it all, is that you're really good at setting boundaries for yourself and your family. And I think like still kind of prioritizing above all your health, your time with your daughter, your time with your wife, and also your time with yourself too. I know like maybe what was it like about like 5 months ago, you decided, hey, on Fridays, I'm going to leave the city and I'm going to go on a hike with my dog. Right. And you've been able to do all of that while also kind of prioritizing those things. I think that's really hard to do as someone who is grinding a lot. Right. I'm like, look at that.
Yeah,
I'm
the
like,
dog,
I,
the walks are like a once a month thing on the calendar that I've had to kind of budge sometimes, and it's really freaking cold out right now. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm trying to set those boundaries. And taking August, for example, and saying just like I don't care who you are and what you want, I'm off. I'm off the grid for August was hard. I think I appreciate that you're seeing that. Yeah, I didn't mention this, but yeah, I've been super present as a dad all year too, which I'm really, really proud of.
yeah, and I think your superpower for that I've been noticing and picking up on is like you're really good at setting expectations, right? And I think then at that point it makes it easy for everyone because like okay, like here's what Ben is gonna do, here's what he can do, cannot do, and I think that's what it makes it all work. I don't know. That's something that I'm gonna borrow from you for this year.
Appreciate that. Yeah, man. The amount of expectations I've set with people this year is insane. And I learned, I actually learned that lesson early last year. I think we talked about one of these. I made a post on LinkedIn about this like pull versus push advisory engagements. And the basic idea is that I agreed to be a product advisor for an early stage company that I was expecting. The unstated assumption was that they would pull advice out of me. They'd pull me in, hey, I have a question. Can you help me think through it? When instead, what I noticed in practice was the other person kind of expecting me to be proactively pushing things to them to help them, which is, I don't think, a reasonable expectation for an advisor. And I didn't state that. And so I learned early last year, man, that was like my first paid engagement in this journey. Like if I don't start to get really crisp with people on like what they can expect and what my expectation is for how to set this up for success, it won't work. So I'm happy. And yeah, I obviously carry that to the podcast and everything I do just to, it's like, I don't think you can really have boundaries unless you set expectations. They kind
Yeah.
of feel connected, right?
And I think a lot of the people that me and you admire, right? Like those people that we're talking about, people living on their own terms. Like I'm sure if you be like, hey, what is if there's a Venn diagram, what is in the middle? Like I wouldn't be surprised if setting expectations would be there, right? Like an example that comes to mind is Gib, right? Gibson Biddle.
Mm-hmm.
He said when he stopped working full time, he would go to startups, be like, hey, like you're gonna pay me the same amount of equity as your highest paid exec. I'm only gonna be working 3 times a week, and here's what you can expect from me, right? And if he hadn't done that, he probably would have not been able to sustain the pace that he's had and see the amount of success. So I think that there's definitely something there.
Yeah. So anyways, I appreciate you saying that. Productivity unlocks. Okay,
Yeah.
for me, easily, hands down, Claude projects.
Nice.
What about you?
I think for me, I've worked really hard to not have any meetings before noon every day and avoiding my phone until like 10:30 or so in the morning. And that has been huge. Like I just like being able to do deep work in the morning and focus on the one thing that I think is the most important thing for the business. That's been a game changer. Another big one is working out in the middle of the day. Like I just religiously, like every day, between 2:30 to 3 p.m. I'll work out. And that breaks up my days really nicely and kind of gives me like a reset to the day. As I've grown the team at Supra, Loom has been a huge game changer. Like I think kind of back to not wanting to have meetings, trying to always first record a Loom or having them record a Loom and then see if it makes sense to have a meeting. That's been such a huge unlock. Another really big one has been dictation. For some reason, like the activation energy for dictation feels a lot lower than typing. That's been huge for, I've become an AI power user, something like a lot. I've been able to get a lot more use from it, from just sharing a lot more context and making that easier. But also I use dictation for drafting emails or messages, or when I go on a walk and I want to write about something, right? Just like dictating it and then trusting that the model is going to understand me and then it's going to format it in a way that then I can work with it. That's been huge. And then finally taking at least like 4 to 5 walking breaks, like not super long, but like 15 minutes, where I just stretch my legs, will put it into a podcast. Like that has also made my day a lot more enjoyable.
Those are good. Since I only started using Claude Project at the end of last year, that probably feels like a lazy answer. I mean, look, like the truth is that as a parent, childcare is a huge
Yeah.
productivity unlock. So just paying for daycare, just keeping daycare going and getting nannies and stuff when we need them or babysitters is huge. I always get enough sleep. Like I don't compromise on sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. Huge for productivity. I think one thing that's worked really well for me is I've kind of started linking. So sometimes when you're building habits, it helps to link them together. So I do my daughter drop off every morning to daycare, which is 30 minutes walking. And then there's a really good coffee shop I love around her. So I've started bringing my laptop with me when I do the drop off. And then I go to the coffee shop for the first 2 hours of the day, usually from like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And I try to get heads down time at the coffee shop, and they actually boot you off of their Wi-Fi after 2 hours. So that forces
Oh,
me to
nice.
then get up and figure out what I want to do next, get lunch, go home. So I've pretty much put blocks on my calendar that prevent people from scheduling time with me, usually before 11 a.m. So even though I have a bunch of chaos in my life before 11 a.m., but it's at least no meetings. And then one thing I'm actually going to start doing, which I learned recently from, there's a really good episode of the podcast called Startup Dad, which is hosted by Adam Fishman. And Adam had Matt Martin, who's the founder CEO of Clockwise, on the podcast recently. And he talked about how he creates a buffer at the end of every day before he needs to do every parent knows, but at some point you just have to go be present with your kids. And for every person that's different. But for me, it's usually around like 5:30, 6 p.m. So what he does is he blocks off that last like 45 to an hour before he needs to be present with family. And it's just to like debrief and like finish things before he can transition. And that's actually something that I still haven't implemented because I have some residual meetings that have already been put on the books. But as the windows open up in future weeks, I'm putting those blocks in so that I can start to kind of increasingly consolidate the available meeting time from like roughly 11 a.m. to maybe like 4:30 p.m. And if it's not important enough to make it into those hours, it's not important enough, right? And everything else has to happen async. So that's something I'm excited to try.
Yeah, I love those.
And that ties into things we're working towards this year. So yeah, less meetings I think would be nice. If I can find a way to be as productive and just less meetings, I would be super happy with that, I think. Not that I don't enjoy this, but this is not the typical meeting. I would say I'd like to get so on the interview coaching side, one thing I'd love this year is to try to get my co-pilot materials to be good enough that I could charge for them as a standalone offering. I think they're not
Nice.
far from that, but I would love to have some kind of $100 to $200 price point offering that, you could still maybe email me with questions about it or something, but it's not requiring any synchronous sessions, which I think would be cool. I want to start getting some of my content on YouTube for my interview coaching because I think a lot of people go to YouTube to learn more about interview prep, and I have zero footprint on YouTube right now. So I'd like to get in there and continue experimenting with my Maven course to see kind of like whether it's the sustainable thing, and maybe tinker with starting a different Maven course that I could actually deliver value to people that have budgets from their employers so I can tap into more. I can grow like the addressable market for spending. Think about people between jobs / interviewing and how much budget they have and they can't reimburse anything versus people that have jobs and employers that will reimburse them for learning. And I think that would be cool. And I'd love to do maybe something around user research on that front. And yeah, that's probably the biggest ones in that bucket. What about you?
Yeah, I think I talked about some of them already, but there's investing more time on learning, maybe like a couple of hours a week. I think force myself to be playing with AI constantly, both for personal use cases, but also push the team at Supra to find kind of use cases where we can save cost or do something more effectively. I definitely have this excitement to get that leverage, but also this fear of falling behind. I think related to that too, I want to continue to get more and more leverage on my time. What that means probably is remove myself more fully from Supra's operations. I've already made some great progress on that, but I think that's something that I want to continue doing and become this almost like snowball where I'm doing less and less of it. So, I mean, I'm still going to use my time to work in Supra, but for, spend it on higher leverage things, more strategic things that I think will be beneficial and will make the community like 10 times better. I think the other thing that I'm excited about this year is like simplifying things. This is both true for my personal life, but also my professional life. So like finding ways in which it's like, hey, like, am I making something too complicated? Do I have too many things? Like just like remove friction and complexity anywhere I can, because I definitely feel like it makes interacting with my environment or my life or work less pleasant when there's like all these things that feel cluttered or wait, so there's just too much friction to do something. And then the last part that I want to do is get better at the things that I think AI won't be able to do that really will continue to give me an edge, right? Like I think like the way I think about like getting an edge right in the future is like one, like getting really good at using these tools, but also then getting really good at the things that these tools are not good at. So then you're really just kind of like above everything in a little bit, right? And the three things that I've been thinking about is like, one is like, how can I build my creativity muscle? Like I think like AI is just something that is just not very creative by nature. So how can I get in touch with that? Maybe it's like a combination of like doing some sort of like, I don't know, painting or photography, but I want to get in touch with that. Refining my taste, so start to be more opinionated about like what's good, what's not, what I like, what I don't like it. Empathy is another big one. I think like just started to spend more time with our members, with our users, and really kind of build that intuition. I think that's going to be really helpful. And then finally, get really good at first principle thinking, right? Like, and kind of get really good at asking why this works this way or why this has to be this way. I think that's going to be, all those things are going to be really useful moving forward.
Those are really good. Yeah, AI for me specifically, one trend, let's say, that I'm excited about is within AI, just the AI powered prototyping trend, and I think I'm behind on it right now, and I want to get ahead on it, like V0, Versal, or Vercel,
Replit.
however you say that, Replit. I want to start playing with these things more and see if I could build something that maybe even generates like some non-zero amount of revenue, just to try, because I have some ideas, and I think deep down I'm still stuck in the before times where you couldn't do the stuff on your own, and I think it's been moving so fast that I'm probably capable of doing way more than I think I can right now. So I want to play with it. Then a completely unrelated trend that I'm excited about is more people getting into IC work, and like just like IC work is cool again. It's valued, it's well rewarded, it's well paid, and I'm just excited about that trend as like a member of the product ecosystem.
That's so funny. Two of the things that you mentioned were trends that I was excited about. One was like, I'm excited to personally build more products, even though like Supra is a quote unquote product. I'm not really building any tech products. Like I'm just like stitching tools together, and the experience is almost the product. But I do want to build more, quote unquote software products. It doesn't have to be something that I sell. It doesn't have to be something that gets used by a lot of people. It could be a product that gets used internally, but I'm just like excited to get in touch with my builder roots, if you will. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, like connected to, is like that trend of like the Super IC. I'm really excited about. And in particular, I'm just excited for PM productivity to go up while also making the role more fun. And I think the way I see that happening is like, how can we find ways to delegate that, boring shit, to AI, but and double down on the stuff that you love, right? I also think related to the prototyping topic that you mentioned, I think something that I'm really excited about is like companies having really like shorter product cycles, which allow them to, I think in the future, that's going to lead to better products, because like they're just going to iterate much faster, and right, and like they'll have more shots on goal, right? So I think like the quality of like great products are going to come up, but it's going to go up a lot, I think. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also excited for like, I think because all the things that we just talked about, I think we're going to find more PMs that are going to become entrepreneurs and founders, like that are going to start with like small side projects, right? Like Clairvo with like chat PRD, like probably at some point, if she wanted to, she could turn that into like her full-time thing. So I'm excited for more PMs kind of tinkering on the side, and then maybe finding the courage to then take that and run with it and build real businesses. Like I think that would be super cool. And then finally kind of connected to like the productivity and kind of with AI getting more leverage, right? Like I think something that is going to be a really good trend is like PMs getting closer to the business side of things, right? And having a better understanding of how marketing works, how sales works, how positioning works. And I think that is going to make them better product builders, more useful for companies. So I think, I think that that's a trend that I'm excited about too. And then personally, something that I'm excited about too is just getting better at distribution myself. Like I just like kind of feel like I got a taste for it this year of like, okay, like if you spend time and if you hack a couple of things around, like it can really make a difference. So continue to see how can I do that, and how can I, yeah, like, try different mediums, and see what I can learn there.
That's great. I love all that. I should probably think more about what else I should be doing, but I feel like I feel like it's enough. Oh my
Yeah,
God, too many things going on.
I
Yeah, in the
know.
spirit of focus, I think that's a good place to
Yeah,
wrap. This was awesome. I really enjoyed
yeah,
this kind of like reflective moment. There was certainly a forcing function. Honestly, nothing else forced me to sit down and write any of this stuff down. So it was good to actually do that. And I hope the audience finds the conversation interesting. And I'm curious what other people are thinking about. If there's any big trends or any specific things you're excited about going into the new year that we didn't talk about, I'd love to hear it.
yeah. DM us on LinkedIn or find a way to get in touch with us. But yeah, I would also be super interesting. What are people prioritizing? What tools are they playing with? And I'm excited. I feel like 2025 is going to be a big year for both of us.
Let's make it happen, man. Keep doing the
Amazing.
thing.
Okay, this is a wrap.
That's a wrap. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who you think would benefit from it as well. We really appreciate it. We'd also love a follow or a rating on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube. That's going to let other people find us. And if you have any topic recommendations for a future episode, please send myself or Mark a DM on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.